back on the Zero Hour. I am Richard RJ Eskow. General Electric is a corporation whose motto is or used to be GE, we bring good things to life. But apparently lately they've been bringing windfalls to life for their shareholders while workers struggle to get by. That's the subject of an article by our next guest who co-authored it. Owen Davis is a reporter on finance and Wall Street for the International Business Times. He has co-authored a piece about General Electric with Cole Stangler, and he joins us now. Owen, thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's glad to be with you.
Well, listen, excellent piece here, and rather than me summarizing it, why don't you just give us a brief rundown of what you and Cole found in your research on General Electric?
Yeah, definitely. So General Electric kind of exemplifies this trend in large employers and big corporations right now, in which employees are not quite seeing the benefits of an improving economy. They're not seeing wage gains at the same time that shareholders in these corporations are seeing massive and at times record payouts in the form of dividends and share buybacks, which inflates the stock price at certain times and is often demanded by activist shareholders.
Now, let me make a couple observations here, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, you agree or disagree. Number one, when we hear politicians talk about wealth inequality, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about corporations who take their increased income and direct it all to shareholders and very little of it to workers. Is that a fair summary from your point of view?
Yeah, I think that's one analysis that you can make, and that's the central question that we're working with, I think, is when these corporations create wealth, when they make profits, who is sharing in that wealth? And decades ago, you would see that as corporate profits rose, the employees would share in those profits, and as unemployment went down, wages would go up. In the latest recovery, you see unemployment going down steadily, but you don't see wages rising nearly as quickly as economic models would suggest that they should. And a piece of that puzzle, some argue, is the increased rate of share buybacks, the increases in dividends that are going directly to shareholders.
We're talking with Owen Davis of the International Business Times about his reporting on General Electric. You know, when we talk about these problems and wage stagnation and wealth flowing to shareholders in the 1% and not to the working people of the country and so on, I guess there are two ways to go at it. One is the macro way, the macroeconomic way of saying, well, this is what's happening on a nationwide scale and so on. The other is to kind of do a case study. And you and Cole Stangler did a case study on General Electric. So let's start with the workers. You interviewed some, you looked at the data. What did you guys find was going on? Are they being laid off? Are their wages just frozen? Are they being overworked? Is it all of the above? What's going on?
Right, so it's definitely interesting to look at the case-by-case basis. In a company like General Electric, which is so huge and so spread out over so many industries, it's hard to see that in the micro. But Cole Stangler, who co-authored the piece, my colleague here at International Business Times, he went up to Fort Edward, up in the Adirondacks in upstate New York, where GE for a number of decades had a capacitor plant that employed 200 employees. And they've moved to close it in the last couple of years, and it's right now kind of on its last legs. They're moving it down to Clearwater, Florida, where the union says that the employees will be paid far less, something like a wage cut from $28 an hour to around $12 an hour. And that's being made on the basis of cost cutting, on the basis of GE has certain targets that they want to hit for cost savings. The union negotiated, they couldn't hit those savings, and now they're moving the plant. So at the same time that these workers who've been at this plant for decades are being told, you need to cut back or else we're going to move this plant because we need to hit cost savings, you see General Electric initiating stock buybacks that the most recent of which are $50 billion have been authorized to buy back shares in the company. So it's really massive amounts of money that are moving around at the top, where at the bottom of the corporation, employees are being told that they need to tighten up.
Well, Owen Davis of the International Business Times, your piece is very well reported, objectively written, as good journalism should be. But I have to say, in reading it, especially this contrast between the workers and the shareholders, it really ticked me off, because General Electric, as you undoubtedly know from your own reporting in this field, General Electric was bailed out by the American taxpayer as when it had gone into finance, the world of finance and capital. It was not a bank. It was allowed to become a bank at the last minute, basically retroactively, in order to get bailout money. Before that, it behaved with extraordinary irresponsibility in purchasing mortgage companies and encouraging them to write as many lousy loans as possible. So now they turn around. We bailed them out. They're doing well. We can talk about they're selling off their banking business, but we can talk about that. But I guess what really bothers me about this is basically the working people of America who were part of rescuing them are now, as I read your story, getting the short end of the stick, while the people who got bailed out are skimming the cream. Am I right to be ticked off about that?
Well, yeah, I think there is actually a pattern in you see large corporations do get especially the ones involved in the financial mess, and get that lifeline at the same time that I think some workers would argue that they haven't gotten the same kind of benefits. That same pattern played out at General Motors recently. Also bankrupt. It also got large cash infusions, investments from the federal government, and then recently became subject of activist shareholder demands to return something like $8 billion in share buybacks to help prop up the stock price. And what was interesting in that case is that coming so close off of General Motors being bailed out and saved from bankruptcy, some worried that this is a company that needs to keep up their cash balance to avoid going into another bankruptcy. And the ratings agencies actually said, if you go through with this stock buyback plan, you're going to risk a downgrade because we want to see you with a big cash, a lot of cash in the coffers to keep from going bankrupt. So not only did that affect the workers who are not going to see potential wage gains, it also affected the health and longevity of the company. And they ended up acceding to the demands of the shareholders, not fully, but to the tune of about $5 billion.
So let me ask you, switching to GE Capital, the capital arm, which, is related to your story. Okay, so GE Capital, they're selling it off now after reaping the benefits for a while of that and then being rescued when their bad bets went bad and so on. Now they're escaping that business. I'm wondering if that in some way was partially done to free themselves up to reward shareholders even more. You got any thoughts on that?
For a long time, General Electric has been saying, for several years now, they've been promising that they're going to reduce their exposure to financial markets and their finance arm. A lot of that comes from Dodd-Frank and the increasing regulatory burden that is on them to maintain safe financial controls with such a huge, what would be the seventh biggest bank in the country if it were an independent financial firm. And when GE announced that it was spinning off this massive financial arm, it did say, pretty much one-to-one correspondence between the cash savings that they would eventually see, the cash that would eventually come into their overall cash flow, and the shareholder rewards that they were going to dole out. So they announced that $90 billion eventually over the course of several years would come out of this deal, be freed up, as they say, and at the same time, they announced a combination of dividend increases and share buybacks that totaled $90 billion. So it's they say that pretty straightforwardly.
Okay, then I guess I just have one last topic to bring up. We're talking with Owen Davis of the International Business Times about the piece he co-authored on General Electric, rewarding shareholders and leaving workers struggling to find a footing. And the last question is this: okay, with these kinds of patterns of wealth hoarding, for lack of a better term, any thoughts on public policy solutions, or is there anything the public or its elected officials can do about this?
Yeah, and this is an interesting part of the story that, and it hasn't gotten a lot of public attention. Stock buybacks, specifically, if we're going to look at stock buybacks, of which there have been $2.5 trillion awarded in the last 5 years, they weren't always, in their current form, legal. They were considered stock manipulation by the SEC until 1982, when a rule change went through, and companies started using them a whole lot more. And there hasn't been a lot of discussion about any sort of regulatory approach that would go back to limiting or changing the amount that corporations can buy back their own stock or increase dividends. But I think as more people start to pay attention to stock buybacks and shareholder awards more generally, I think that you might start to see those initiatives come up again, because it wasn't always the case that this was standard operating procedure in corporate America.
Well, I think that's a great point, and unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. So, Owen Davis of the International Business Times, I guess you'll go back to doing your great reporting, and meanwhile, I'm going to go start a revolution. So, thanks so much for joining us, Owen Davis.
Great. It was great being with you.
Same here. We'll be right back after this. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.